everyone, welcome back to 996 The Howl. Yesterday, the PHNX Coyotes podcast, daily podcast, posted their mock-up of a very, very, very early line combination for the Arizona Coyotes. And I think they kind of just got in their own way a little bit. They had Guenther on the fourth line, and that just made me go, it's not that hard, guys. It's not hard. Guenther is not going to be on the fourth line. I'll say it right now, opening night game, Twitter, the Coyotes media, they'll post the lineup for the night. If Guenther is listed as a fourth line winger, I will do something special to show how wrong I was. But I'll just do my own. It's going to be a quick one. It really isn't that hard, and I was screaming at the screen as to why they decided to make the moves they did. I agree with some of their ideas. Duos are very important and probably more important than trios. It's really hard to get a trio of players to mesh well. We saw that with Keller, Boyd, and Schmaltz 2 seasons ago. That didn't work out last season, and then Hayden takes that spot, and now Keller, Hayden, and Schmaltz are a really good trio. But usually you go with duos and then try to fill some gaps there. I think the one sticking point I was disagreeing with, and this is why they got in their own way, they said that if you play on the penalty kill, your line mate 5-on-5 should also play on the penalty kill, which is interesting. It could work in certain ways, like Krause and Bukestad last season, but I think when you're making your top 6, I don't think that is the top priority and requirement. And if it leads to a top 6 scoring winger in Guenther being the fourth line, I think something's wrong there. So we'll get into it. I'm sure I'll talk about that a bit more, but the first one's pretty obvious. It should be everyone's. There's no reason to not do this. Obviously, in the season, anything could happen. So, but for right now, there's no point in deviating from something that works. And we all know Schmaltz will inevitably get injured this season, as, it seems like every season he does get injured. And then when Schmaltz gets injured, Guenther will take his spot, and then maybe Keller and Guenther become a dynamic duo, and then we're left with, what do we do with Schmaltz? So, obviously, this is very early. It's July. It's the end of this July. So anything happen, roster moves. Cooley, Geeky will not be on this board. They will be going back to their respective junior teams. So we get into the second line where PHNX, they kept the first and second line from last season intact as a top 6. For me, I'm changing the second line. I'm putting... This guy's making $5 million for 1 year, and there's only one reason why Zucker signed this contract, is so that he could produce really well, and so next year when the cap goes up, he gets either the same money, because he's not really worth a $5.5 million player. He could be, but the cap goes up, he produces well in the Coyotes because you put him in your top 6, and then he makes $6 million on his next contract. So for me, it doesn't make sense for me for him to be on the third line that PHNX did. So I got Zucker, Bukestad, and Guenther here. So yes, I'm breaking up the Krause, Bukestad, and Michelli line. But what happened when Bukestad got traded at the deadline last year? It took a couple weeks, and then Krause, McBain, and Michelli worked really well, and Michelli never really missed a step playing with McBain. For me, Zucker is a top 6 guy. He's playing your top 6. He should not be in your third line. I don't think that's why he signed in Arizona. Guenther needs to be a top 6 guy. The PHNX podcast was saying they need to shelter him 5-on-5, and then he'll get most of his ice time on the power play. I don't know why we still think like that. To me, that's a very Rick Tocchet line of thinking. Why did we play Michelli's second line last year? No one had any concerns about his defensive 5-on-5 game, and after his rookie season, he doesn't really have amazing defensive 5-on-5 stats. He's a pure elite playmaker who's not the best defensively, yet we kept him in the top 6 whenever he was healthy. So I don't understand this sheltering of Guenther. He needs to learn how to play 5-on-5 right now. Like, that's how you develop players. We're not doing this thing of sheltering these guys, like what we did with Strome, what Tocchet did with Hayden. Put him in those positions. Andre Tourney's a great developmental coach. He'll teach these guys how to play. You pair him with a defensively okay, well-rounded player in Bukestad, who could also go into dirty areas and retrieve pucks. Same with Zucker or Zucker. Give me the Zuck. He could go. He's a hard battler too. He's a goal scorer as well. He knows how to put pucks in the net. He's a veteran like Bukestad, but he is not scared to go into the boards and retrieve pucks. And then Guenther just needs to be in the right position and fire shots, slap daddy style. So that's why I like Zucker, Bukestad, and Guenther. I really like this top six. And like I said, injuries are going to happen, and it's going to switch everything around. I already said my third line, so it's not a surprise anymore. McBain still needs to sign. His arbitration date is July 30th, so still waiting on that. And then we got Michelli, third line wing. To me, this is like two second lines we have. It's not to say that Michelli is a third line guy, Krause is a third line guy. For the Coyotes, the second and third line will probably just get the same amount of ice time every game. And so it's not really like these are going to be third line minutes. They'll play. If they're playing better one night than the second line, then they'll turn into the second line. If the second line's performing well one night or is on a hot streak for the week, they'll play more than the third line. To me, that second and third line is interchangeable. And so what Steve Peters, I really hope it is Steve Peters, what he said was he likes penalty killing duos on the same line. However, in their mock-up, they had Boyd on the fourth line with Carcone and Guenther. So Boyd is a penalty killer, and you have him left alone. So why is it wrong for me to do Krause, McBain? Okay, I'll fill it in here. I'll have two penalty killers on the fourth line, and Boyd and Kerfoot. And then Carcone is here. I'll talk about some other things too. So what PHNX had, they had Krause and Bukestad, and then McBain, I got it here, McBain and Kerfoot. And their reasoning was McBain and Kerfoot will be on the penalty kill, Krause, Bukestad, penalty kill, those other penalty kill duos. And then they had Boyd alone on the fourth line with Guenther and Carcone. So why is it wrong for me to have just Bukestad alone on the second line, and you have two pairs here? You have Boyd and Kerfoot, two penalty killers, Krause and McBain, two penalty killers. In fact, you got two centermen, which gives you that versatility and flexibility on the penalty kill. So let's say the second line goes out and they commit a penalty. Then you put Krause and McBain on the first shift of the penalty kill, or Boyd and Kerfoot. What if Krause, McBain, and Michelli, they get a penalty, and now Krause or McBain or both are tired? Then you put in Boyd and Kerfoot. What if Boyd and Kerfoot, that fourth line, they commit a penalty? And let's say, Krause and McBain are tired. Then you have that fifth penalty killing forward in Bukestad, and there's no real sixth penalty killer here. So you have bona fide five penalty killers in Bukestad, Krause, McBain, Boyd, and Kerfoot. And then we've seen Keller kill penalties, and I'm not saying Keller's going to be a mainstay penalty killer, but he will take those rotations where there's 30 seconds left in the penalty killing. There was that season, 2 seasons ago, he was actually a mainstay during that Eriksson Beagle era because we had no one else to put on the PK. Last year, his penalty killing time on ice went a little bit down than the previous year. So Keller could still be that penalty killing guy. We also saw Hayden near the end of last season play a little bit of the PK. I'm just saying you have an option for that sixth penalty killing forward. So I don't know why it's wrong for me to put Bukestad alone with no penalty killers, yet they put Boyd on the fourth line alone with no penalty killers when both Boyd and Bukestad are penalty killers. So we'll get into the defense. Not too much disagreement here. I have Soderstrom in my lineup. They had Soderstrom like an 8th defenseman. They had Kolyachonok ahead of him and Dermott ahead of him. I think Soderstrom's going to be on the team. If he's started in Tucson again, that's real bad news for a first round pick. It's been so long. Just something needs to give. You just throw him out there. You develop him. One, if the coaches have it like this guy's not ready, he's not good. You gotta trade it. You gotta trade him and get something back. I mean, I know Dursey is sort of that like next step. Soderstrom, if Soderstrom doesn't really pan out, they have Dursey, a young, offensively minded defenseman who could, chip in on the offense and move the puck well. But this is the year. We gotta find out, is Soderstrom going to be on this team long term or not? Just make the decision this year when the expectations aren't high. Whereas if you put him in Tucson again, and then we're in next off season, the expectations should be we're battling for a playoff spot the whole year. Not this year, even though there's chances that might happen. But for this year, again, it's another developmental year, so you got to see what you got in Soderstrom once and for all. So we'll do the pairings here. We got the reliable defenseman in Moser attached with the new shiny toy and Sean Dursey. Then we got the reliable guy again, Valimaki, with Soderstrom. And then here I'm going to put Stetcher, but I really do think once Dermott gets healthy, he hasn't really played much in the past 2 seasons, gets acclimated on playing NHL speed again. So I think the first quarter of the season, I'm going to have Stetcher here, but I really plan on Dermott taking that spot on the bottom pairing where Stetcher has. I think Dermott does have more upside than Stetcher. I know Dermott has a 2-way contract, so he could go in Tucson, but I think in the middle to the end of the season, Dermott should surpass Stetcher. I didn't really like Stetcher's game with the Coyotes. He didn't even score. I'm not really sure what he is. Like, he's not a defensive defenseman. He's not physical. He's just a middle-of-the-road type of defenseman. Maybe makes mistakes here and there, maybe doesn't. But to me, he's just really middle of the road, so I don't know why they would put him in the top 4. So I'll just write it down with Stetcher. And putting Brown here, I love Brown. You got to have some physicality in your lineup. You're going to have McBain, Krause, Bukestad hold the fort up front for that physicalness. And yeah, it's really weak, I agree, on the defensive side in terms of being physical. They also mentioned Kesselring's more of a physical guy. I didn't see that out of him, even though I know he's a big guy. I really think Brown is going to put all the duties on his back to be that physical defenseman, clear the front of the net, be hard to play against, get into a fight here and there. So I like Brown. I don't think he's a 7th D-man. I like him as a bottom pairing. And so what I also want to say is what they rarely mentioned was that Andre Tourney likes to go 11 and 7, 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. That's where I think maybe a guy like Dermott is in the press box, rotating on the ice one game, back to the press box. They could carry that 7th defenseman. And then for the forwards, I said it once they signed Carcone to that contract. I don't know where he's going to be. He's not a bona fide prototypical 4th-line guy. He is a guy where his best asset is his north-south speed. So I don't know how that works on the 4th line, which is why, for me, Carcone could rotate in with O'Brien if they want that fighter in their lineup. But they could also if you just remove Carcone, and then you have 11 forwards, and then you have Boyd and Kerfoot as the duo, and then you could put in anyone you want there. Because Kerfoot is such a versatile player. He was playing like 2nd-line center for the Leafs sometimes. Sometimes he was a 1st-line winger. Sometimes he's 2nd-line winger. You could put Keller here. You could double shift Keller. Keller has worked well with Boyd in the past, so you could have a double shift Keller, Boyd, Kerfoot line. I have no problems with that. Let's say Guenther is really feeling it that game. You put Guenther with Boyd and Kerfoot, maybe Michelli, maybe Krause. I really like that 11th forward formation. To me, Carcone doesn't really fit in that 4th-line role. Even if you put O'Brien there to be that fighter, goon guy, O'Brien doesn't really mesh well with Boyd and Kerfoot. Like Boyd and Kerfoot, they could be sneaky, skilled. They could put the puck in the net. I mean, maybe someone else, Sanford I would agree and like Sanford to be there instead of Carcone. But the problem is Carcone has a one-way contract, and you really don't want to send him down on the waiver wire after rewarding him with a contract. Just seems a bit in bad faith, but we'll never know. So we'll go with extra forwards. For me, this is in order as well. I'll have Sanford as a number one priority guy to fill in here. And then O'Brien if you need a fighter. Yannick, once he re-signs with the Coyotes, see what he's got. He, to me, another, and Kellerman as well. Kellerman and Yannick, I like better than Carcone on the fourth line wing, even though I know Carcone's more skilled than those guys, but they play a heavier board style game where it just fits well on the fourth line. So that's my extra forwards in order of priority. And then for defensemen, like I said, Dermott is right there. The moment Stetcher starts, making mistakes and not playing well, Dermott's getting that spot right away. Then I'll put Kesselring because he is the bigger frame and has that physicalness to his game. So he's second. And then Kolyachonok, I'm not really high on him. I know that podcast, the PHNX, they're really high on Kolyachonok. I don't know why. He played a lot the season before in Andre Tourigny's first season. That was because we had nobody. We were overplaying Kolyachonok, Deneen, Mayo. We were overplaying them so much that we signed Mayo to a 3-year contract, and it just immediately blew up in our face the next season. So just because we played them so much in that season, it didn't tell me they're NHL ready. And we barely played Kolyachonok last year. I believe he had 2 games played. I didn't refresh myself on the number of games he played last season, but it wasn't a lot. I don't think he's NHL ready. First pairing on Tucson for sure. And to me, Tucson's could be really sneaky good, especially with these forwards. I mean, except O'Brien, but Yannick, Kellerman, Sanford signed a 2-way deal. They could go to Tucson, even Dermott, Kesselring, Kolyachonok, they go to Tucson. You mix in guys like, McCartney, Josh Stone, Nathan Smith. You got some really good players down in Tucson. So I think this video is going on longer than it should have been. This is my formation, very early July thought process of what the lineup should be, the line combination. Go off. If you disagree, you could say whatever you want. I think this is pretty good. I think everything fits well. No one stands out as they shouldn't be there. And I'd be happy with this formation. And I think they should go with this opening night. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.